I'm Sydney Wyatt from Honeywell Energy and Sustainability Solutions, and I'm here today with Justin Kirchhoff, CEO of Summit Agriculture Group, to talk about the intersection of agriculture and renewable energy. Thank you for being here today, Justin.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start off, when people hear agriculture and they hear renewable energy, not everybody may connect the dots right away between farms and renewable fuels. What can you tell us about the mission of Summit?
Well, a little background on our company. We were founded by Bruce Rastetter. Today we make investments at the intersection of ag and renewable energy. We're headquartered in Iowa. We own farmland, hog buildings, but a large part of our business is making investments in companies that transform a commodity into something more value added. And so down in Brazil, for example, we produce about 700 million gallons of low carbon ethanol from corn. And we're also looking to build a carbon pipeline in the upper Midwest to lower the carbon footprint of ethanol plants so that ethanol then can become eligible for sustainable aviation fuel. So it all fits together, and we like to play kind of a unique spot in each one of those parts of the value chain.
That perfectly leads into my next question. We were going to talk a little bit more about some of the projects you've got going on. You just referenced a few really all over the world. Could you get into a little more detail about some of the key technological advancements that are driving some of those projects?
Yeah, I think when you think about agriculture and energy, it's all about cost of production and ability to scale. And so our focus has been, what has happened within agriculture over the last couple decades? How has corn production grown? How has it gotten more efficient over time? And it's a really good story to tell. I had mentioned earlier to the group that if you think about the United States and the concept of food production, at the end of the First World War, there was 100 million acres of corn grown in the United States. This year we'll plant about 97 million acres, 96. The difference is we'll produce 6 to 7 times more corn than we did back then. We've seen an incredible growth in corn production, which has driven down costs, made that feedstock more affordable and useful for converting it into ethanol, converting it into sustainable aviation fuel and other products we can use around the world.
It's a really exciting example and very concrete to see how we're using less space to make 6, 7 times more than we were before. Let's connect the dots a little bit between the thoughts around energy security and then ethanol as a feedstock. How do you see those playing?
The example that I would give is Summit Carbon Solutions, which is our project in the upper Midwest. So essentially what that project does is we'll capture around 18 to 20 million tons of carbon off of an ethanol plant, and a variety of them. We have 57 plants on our system. We will lower their carbon footprint by about half.
Wow.
Making them more profitable and making their ethanol then eligible for conversion into sustainable aviation fuel. So that's the first step. Then you take that carbon, you put it in a pipeline, and you send it to a place like North Dakota, where ultimately it could be used to produce more oil, because the Bakken today produces, call it 10% of the U.S. oil production. And we believe that the amount of CO2 we will be able to send to North Dakota to produce more oil will actually result in close to $1 trillion of oil production that wouldn't happen otherwise, and obviously one of the largest oil formations in the United States. So this whole concept of the merging of ag and energy is happening in a really big way, and obviously we're thrilled to play a part of it.
You're right at the summit of it.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so with your background in investment, what kind of trends around renewable energy are you observing in the sector, and what do you think is the most compelling or exciting of those trends?
Yeah, I think over the last 2 to 3 years, there's certainly been a shift or kind of sobriety moment around, okay, what's possible and what's reality. There's a lot of technologies available that, say could convert a variety of products into something value add, but they're, in our estimation, a long way off and really expensive. And so what we've tried to focus on is, whether it's on the carbon capture side or sustainable aviation fuel, is what is reality today, and how can you produce a product that somebody actually can afford to buy? Because we can talk about all these other things that may happen 20, 30 years down the road, but if it's not reality, the market can't afford it, it really doesn't matter. And so that's why on the carbon capture side, getting ethanol plants to partner with us to take their carbon, that's the lowest cost in our mind of carbon capture, because they emit basically pure CO2. And so that's a big opportunity at the low end of the cost curve. And the same thing would be on the SAF side, where we can take a gallon of ethanol, convert it into sustainable aviation fuel, and that technology, obviously, Honeywell has proven it as our partners on, which gives us a lot of comfort But also when we think about cost of production, we believe we can produce a gallon of SAF cheaper than anybody else in the world, and we can do it at scale. And so that's really going to matter when you think about airlines and other end users that are obviously very worried about their income statement and how much SAF is going to cost. You have to do it at a low cost, and you have to do it at scale.
Right, and not only a low cost, right, but a competitive cost. I mean, when you think about the alternatives, and with airlines in particular as an example, from a regulatory standpoint, what type of action can be driven to help support from an incentives or adoption to help with the commercialization there?
Yeah, I would say it's a lot of, at the federal level, it's things like the 45Z that has the ability to incentivize the production of low carbon fuels, and it's technology neutral. You know, it could be biodiesel, renewable diesel, sustainable aviation fuel. So we like that tax credit a lot because it doesn't pick winners and losers. It just says if you can lower the carbon footprint of a fuel, you can get a premium for it. So that would be the biggest one that I would say at the federal level that would exist. Outside of that, it's just SAF is going to be used not only here in the US, but it's going to be used around the world. So getting some type of framework on what scoring model you use to figure out what carbon footprint you actually have is going to be important, whether it's US GREET model, CORSIA model, all these other models. I think getting everybody on a level playing field and saying this is how we're going to score this product so that the end user knows what they're buying is going to be really important.
100%, it will be. And, you know, when we think about trying to speed things up, permitting has been coming up a lot in the discussion as well. You know, we had some discussion earlier about how quickly you're able to make things happen in Brazil or what's going on in China with some of their projects. So in the U.S., what would it take, in your opinion, to make some of these things happen more quickly?
It again comes back, I think, to the federal level and having certainty on a variety of linear infrastructure projects that have the ability to make us more competitive long term. So that could be transmission lines that are needed to obviously distribute power as you think about data centers and AI. It could be on the pipeline side, linear infrastructure obviously needs some type of certainty around getting through a variety of states or counties that all have different rules. So I think it really revolves around just more certainty, but not only certainty, but speeding up the process, because right now the timeline from saying I want to build a data center to bringing it online is significant, not only in the construction side, but just permitting. Same goes for pipelines in the U.S. or transmission lines. So I think if people can have more certainty that it can get permitted and have certainty that it'll get done quicker, you are going to have a lot more projects happen because that naturally lowers your cost of capital, increases investment returns, and obviously brings a lot of projects out of the ground that I don't think would happen otherwise.
Absolutely. Certainty's been one of the key words that I've heard all day long, and I hope that we'll get a lot more of it soon. And let's talk maybe just briefly, you alluded some to the partnership with Honeywell already with some of the projects going on. Can you talk a little about the collaboration, the technology we're working on together?
Yeah, so when we started to think about SAF, we frankly 5 years ago just did a deep dive and said, what's the landscape look like? It looks like ag's going to play a big role in this. And we looked at fats, oils, and greases. We looked at ethanol conversion to SAF. We ultimately landed on ethanol to jet as being what we thought was the ability to scale in a significant way, but also do it at a low cost. And so that led us on the process of thinking about feedstocks. But the next step was there's no large ethanol to jet plant operating in the world today. So the technology partner side was critical for us. We looked at everything under the sun here in the US, Europe, around the world, had a lot of conversations with tech providers, and ultimately we were thrilled when Honeywell announced their process technology on ethanol to jet, largely because Honeywell has a lot of experience doing these exact type of things on large-scale refineries around the world and has the reputation and the balance sheet to stand behind the process that you're selling. So I think it was a combination of a variety of things, but for us it was not a hard choice on the technology that we ended up picking in terms of Honeywell, and have been thrilled with the collaboration to date.
We are thrilled about it as well and excited for what's to come next. So I do appreciate your time. I want to wrap up with one final closing question for you. And it's slightly more on the personal side, but just when you wake up in the morning, when you're thinking about the future of energy, what is it that excites you most?
Yeah, I grew up on a farm, and so everything that I do kind of relates back to that. And how the American farmer can be profitable long term is something I think a lot about, in particular when we think about other countries like Brazil that frankly have the ability to produce commodities cheaper than we can. Mm-hmm. And so it really revolves around how can we create markets for the American farmer to add value to the production that they have, whether it's corn, soybeans, go down the list, because we've proven we can produce more corn and soybeans, frankly, than we know what to do with in this country. And so it really revolves around trying to find ways to add value to commodities, which ultimately make farmers more profitable. Mm-hmm. And obviously the rural communities and the upper Midwest all benefit. We've seen a decline in that over the last handful of years, and we think it's critical that we find new ways to add value to a kernel of corn, a soybean, go down the list, because we think it'll be critical long term for the viability of not only the ag industry, but those communities that they operate in.
Absolutely. It's great to see the work that Summit's doing,
Yeah.
And the contribution to not only the communities and the farmers, but to the broader world as a whole. So
Yeah.
really appreciate your time today, Justin. Thank
Thanks,
you so
Cindy.
much.
Appreciate it.